If someone's drowning, you'd hardly toss them this stainless steel life preserver. But if he's dying of hunger, it's just the thing, because underneath it is a great fish dish. It's a turban of fillets of sole. We're doing it today on the French Chef.
The French Chef is made possible by a grant from Hills Brothers Coffee Incorporated and by a grant from the Polaroid Corporation.
Welcome to the French Chef. I'm Julia Child. This is a turban of fillets of sole. The fillets are surrounding a light and delicious fish mousse, and it's baked in a ring mold like this. And the fillets line the mold, and the mold line the fillets, and then the mousse goes into the oven, and when it comes out and you unmold it, you can sauce it all up and fill it with something beautiful, and it's a very handsome and satisfying dish. And it looks as though it were an awfully complicated thing to do, but it isn't, and it really has a very haute cuisine taste. So we're going to start it out from the beginning. I think you'll find it an interesting dish to do, and it's certainly wonderful to wonderful to eat. And to make this dish, you'll have to have the kind of fish that will line the mold, and these would be fillets of sole, which just go in like the spokes of the wheel all the way around the mold. And then you have a fish mousse mixture, which goes inside the fish fillets. And for that, you want to have a nice lean fish. You can use the same fillets of sole if you'd like, or you can use halibut or whiting because it's all ground up. But for the fillets which line the mold, you want to have something that will hold together nicely during the cooking, like gray sole if you can find it, or if you're living on the West Coast, petrale sole. And be sure that the fish smells good. In other words, fish shouldn't smell fishy. If you can smell it at all, there's something wrong with it. It has a lovely sort of fresh, almost sweet smell. And I think some people don't like fish very much because they aren't careful when they buy it. And if you get fish that smells fishy, take it right back and complain, because you won't enjoy it unless it's just a lovely smelling. And we're going to start out with the fish mousse, which goes inside the fish fillets. And this doesn't mean a moose with antlers. Mousse comes from the French mousseux, meaning foamy and light. And that's just what it is. It's a thick sauce with eggs and cream in it, and a puree of fish. And we want to have the mousse have as much flavor as possible. And for that, you want to make a fish stock. And if you live wherever you can get fresh fish, you can make the stock out of the fish trimmings or the fish frame. So be sure, if you're going to make this dish, and you can, have the fishman save all the bones from them, and then you just chop them up with your big knife. I think a lot of people throw away these things, or they say, oh, horrid, and make a face about it. But this is really one of the great secrets of French cooking, in that you use all of these items, and this is what gives you the lovely flavor to the dishes. And there's one frame of a sole, and I've got two more there. Now, you don't have to have these trimmings. You can make a very good fish stock out of clam juice. I'm just putting water in now, just enough water to cover. And then we're going to make this a white wine fish stock. If you like to use the wine, put in a cup of wine or dry white French vermouth, and then set it over heat. And be sure, if you're going to use if you're going to cook with wine, that you use a non-staining material. I'm using an oval casserole. I seem to use casseroles for everything. And this one is made out of enameled iron, or use stainless steel or fireproof ceramic. Because if you don't, you'll find that the wine turns a rather grayish color in something like iron or aluminum. And along with, see, we have our fish bones in. If you don't have the bones, you can use some more fish, say about a cup or two of just plain fish meat. Or if you use the clam juice, you'd put in about a cup and a half of clam juice and some wine, and then you want to flavor it up with some herbs and vegetables. And I'm going to use half of a bay leaf, and we want some parsley, but also, because we want the fish stock to keep a nice pale color and not darken, we just use the stems of the parsley and not the leaves, because the stems can darken the stock. And then we want an onion and a carrot. All these, making these stocks seem to turn out about the same way. Whether you're making chicken or fish, you always put in onion and carrot and parsley. We want for this amount about, oh, say a third of a cup of parsley and one nice onion. And the reason we chop it up is so that it will cook faster and give out its flavor more quickly. So in that goes. And we need some salt, about a tablespoon of salt. You don't want to, a teaspoon of salt. You don't want to over-salt at this point because it's going to boil down. And this should cook at a slow boil for about 40 minutes, and then you strain it. I'm not going to cook it now because we've done a lot of that cooking. Then you strain it out and boil it down till you have about 1.5 cups. And then you have a perfectly lovely liquid into which you're going to make your fish mousse, and you can also make the sauce for your mousse. And the sauce that we're going to use for the fish mousse is a special one. It's a very thick flour-based sauce, and it's made in sort of the opposite way of what you usually make a sauce. In other words, we start in with our liquid, and then we put the flour in after it's come to a boil. And for this recipe, we want 1 cup of liquid, and we want half cup of water and a half cup of fish stock. And that goes into a pan. And then we want 4 tablespoons of butter. That's 1/2 stick of butter. And then that goes over heat. And you want to put in about 1 teaspoon of salt. And if you don't have fish stock, you can use clam juice for this, half clam juice and half water. That's 1 cup of liquid and 4 tablespoons of butter, 1 teaspoon of salt, and bring that to the boil. And then while that's coming to the boil, we will measure out the flour that goes into it. And we want 3/4 of a cup of all-purpose flour, which is about 3.5 ounces, and measure it exactly this way. Take a half cup measure and dip it into your container or your bag and level it off with a knife. That's, there's a half cup measure and there's a 1/4 cup measure, making 3/4 of a cup. And now we've got our flour ready, and we want to watch our liquid here. That's to come to the boil, and you let it boil until the butter is melted. This is the same way that you make pâte à choux or cream puff pastry. That's almost melted, but not quite. This is a very useful kind of a sauce to know how to make, because you can use it for it's going to have eggs beaten into it, and it puffs up. And you have to make it this way when you're going to put in as much flour as we're going to put in. So now the butter is melted, so you put all the flour in at once, having taken the pan off heat, and then beat it up with a rubber spoon until it's thoroughly mixed. And then set it again over heat. And you want to beat it thoroughly until it leaves the sides of the pan and also begins to film the pan on the bottom. And the reason you do this is to evaporate all the excess liquid. As you can see, that's just beginning to film the bottom of the pan there. And then you take it off heat again, and we're going to beat in eggs. And you make a well in the center of this hot mixture, and then you break one egg into it. And be sure that this is a U.S. graded large egg. I'm going to set my pan on a pot holder. There. And you notice as you start beating it in, it doesn't look as though it's going to go in at all. But you just keep stirring it, and then gradually, or not gradually, rather quickly in this instance, it all comes together again in a mass. And as soon as it's done that, you then beat in one more egg, having made a well in the center. If you've ever made those cream puff things, the pâte à choux, this is exactly the same way you do it. I don't see any reason why you should buy pâte à choux mix when it's so easy to make. There, now we've got 2 eggs in there. Now we want 2 egg whites, or that is 1/4 cup. And those are 2 egg whites, and beat in half of them at first, and then the other half. And this third addition takes a little bit longer to go in. But the idea of making this is the same with making the cream puff pastry. Now here goes our other egg white, is that you don't want to make a wet mixture. And that's why you want to be sure that you have grated large eggs. If you have jumbo eggs, you find that you had too many in. There. And then just beat that up well. And then we now have what is called a panade, P-A-N-A-D-E. And this is going to go into the puree, and the panade's all ready, but the fish has not been pureed, so we're going to do that. And this, you can puree your fish fillets in a food mill, or if you have one of these attachments for your electric mixer, it purees them very nicely. And we want about 1 3/4 cup of fish fillets, or 1 3/4 cup of raw fish, which will puree up into about 1 1/2 cups. Now you can often get your fish man to puree fish. In that case, you would ask for 3/4 pound of fish fillets. But I think you can measure it perfectly well, because a pint's a pound, so that would be 2 cups. And we want 1 cup. Oh, I'm getting all mixed up here. Anyway, what we want is about 1.5 cups of pureed fish. And that's just about it. A cup and a half of pureed fish, and you want to measure that out into your cup, because we want to use the same amount of our panade, or our thick sauce. So it's nice and sticky, but measure that out into the cup. It doesn't have to be absolutely exactly accurate, but almost. And that looks like about 1 1/2 cups. So in it goes. See, that's equal amounts of panade and equal amounts of fish puree. Then, Now this you can beat by hand, or again you can beat it with an electric mixer. I think I'll do it with an electric mixer just because it goes so quickly. And this is going to be beaten together. Put this machine together. And you want to beat it until it has a nice body to it. In other words, it holds in the spoon, and then we're going to add flavoring and some cream. And I'm going to get the cream which is in the refrigerator. I'll take a look and see how that body is looking. You see, it holds nicely in your spatula, and that's what you want it to do. I'll do it a little bit more. And we also want to add a little bit of nutmeg to it, because that gives some flavor. There's a little grater, and we just want about what they call a small pinch. And then I'm going to start beating in the cream, and we want about 1/2 to 2/3 cup of cream. Beat in a little bit and then beat again, because you want to be sure that you don't let the mousse lose its body. Now stop and see how that is. See, it's still holding its shape nicely. Then a little more, standing well away so it doesn't splatter you. Now we'll take another look at it, and that's still holding itself as well. I'm not beating as long as I could, but I just want to give you the idea. And then be sure and taste it very carefully for seasoning. And don't worry about tasting raw fish, because if it's fresh and lovely, it'll be good. It usually needs a little bit more salt and some white pepper. And be sure to use white pepper, because you don't want it to speckle. I used a good 2 or 3 shakes there. And it needs a little bit more salt. And then beat her up. And that's ready to use. And this you can do ahead and keep refrigerated. And this is now ready, and we have the fish fillets to fill the mold with. Now the recipe I've given you is for an 8-cup mold. I'm going to use a 4-cup ring mold just because it goes faster, and I want you to see exactly how it's done without having to rush through too fast. And so you have here your fish fillets, which are reserved for the lining the mold, and these are fillets of sole. And if you will notice, you probably can't see, but you'll see when you're doing it, the fish fillets have 2 sides. There's one that has little marks on it and gray places, and the other side which is smooth. And this is the smooth, or the best side, which you want to take the unattractive side and score it, which means taking a very sharp little knife and just making a very tiny mark on that side, and that cuts this little filament so that the fillet won't curl up while it is cooking. And now I'm going to line the mold. No, what I have to do, I forgot, is I've got to salt and pepper the fillets, and that's a terribly important thing, because if you don't, I've left my salt over here, if you don't, you'll find that your mousse, that your whole fish dish doesn't have the taste it should, just because you've left out this little step, which I almost did. Maybe by having left it out, that will remind you not to forget it. So just lay them out on a board and sprinkle them with salt, and then again use white pepper. And turn them over and do the same on the other side. Very often you'll find that a dish just lacks something just because this little step was omitted. And now, we're getting ready to line the mold. And have the mold lightly smeared with softened butter, and then with the best side, lay that down as you see the edges hang over the mold and go from one side to the other. It just depends on how many fish fillets you have. And you could use enough fish fillets to completely cover the bottom of the mold, or use just as many as you happen to have. But if you space them out this way, then you will have lined it quite evenly. There, now I have something to do over here. I'm doing something for the inside of it. Now I still have a few more fillets, so I can place one or two in there just to fill it a little more. Somehow you never know how wide the fish is going to be. And then push it all nicely together. And now the mold is lined so the mousse can go in. And that just gets put right in between the fillets. And what's nice about this dish is you can get all of this business done ahead, putting the mousse in, and then just refrigerate it, covered with wax paper, and then cook it later. And if you have any mousse left over, you can cook that in a pan of water. Or you can turn it into a soup or a sauce. There, that's filled just about to the top, and then you want to flip these little ends of the fish over back onto the mousse. You see, that's really very quickly done. If you had, say, your fish man grind the fish for you, and you had a machine that would beat things up, well, you can really get this, well, just as we did. We've gotten it assembled in a very short amount of time. And this, a fork with this same amount, you could fill 2 4-cup molds. Just depend on how you wanted to serve it. And then when you're ready to bake it, it goes into a pan of water in a 375-degree oven, and put it in the lower third of the oven. I've just got a big frying pan of water in here, and the water should come up about halfway up the mold. And then it will bake for about 40 to 60 minutes until it has begun to swell up over the mold. And then you can press it, and it has a certain slight resistance, and then it's done. And you can do it ahead of time, as I have done here, and then leave it in its pan of water in a warming oven. And I've also have my warm serving platter here. So that's warm, and then I have my mousse in here. And this is all ready for unmolding and serving. So, now, you find that there's usually a bit of mousse juice in the mold, and you want to take that out because you unmold it. You don't want your platter swimming. So put a piece of wax paper over it and a cover over it, and then you can drain the mousse juice into, if you have some fish stock, you just drain it in there. And the mousse juice is absolutely delicious too, and you don't want to lose that. And then it's ready to unmold. Now take off the lid and turn the platter upside down. I seem to have a little juice in the platter. Turn the platter upside down and reverse the two. And then hope that the mold is going to come off, which it usually does if it's been well buttered. There she comes. There it is. Isn't that fun? You have this hollow center, and you can fill that with something if you'd like creamed shellfish or mushrooms. I'm going to use some broccoli because I think that's awfully good with it, because it's fresh and green and the color's so nice. So there we are, nice, beautifully cooked broccoli. You have to time the broccoli and the serving of the mold so that they're both hot and perfectly done, and then just lay that right there in the center. You should always think when you're doing something like this about the color combination. For instance, you wouldn't want to have everything all white because your fish is white, and that's why I think broccoli is so good. Buttered asparagus tips would be awfully good also. And then put some sauce around the top of the fillets. And that's why it's a good idea to make a fish stock, because you can make a wonderful white wine fish sauce to go with the fillets. We've done so many fish veloutés that I didn't feel I needed to go into that again. Or you could use a hollandaise sauce, and then you're all ready to fill and rush to the dining room. I mean, you're all ready to serve, which we are. And I'm going to serve it to you so you're going to see how it looks. And with the sauce all over it, you don't have to worry about whether you're cutting between the fish fillets or not, but they're all nicely cooked, so it doesn't really make any difference. And then a bit of broccoli for everybody. And the consistency of this is so nice. It's interesting having the fish fillets and then that tender mousse, and put a little more sauce on top, which is always very attractive to have. And with this, you would serve a very nice, fairly full-bodied white wine, like a white Burgundy. This one happens to be called Clos de Mouche, and I think a mouche and a mousse go very well together. Now this dish, this turban of sole, can go as a main course for a supper. And for anyone who's looking for new and wonderful fish dishes, I think really this is one of the nicest recipes I know of, because it's so handsome and it's so delicious to eat and interesting and beautiful, and I think that it's something you will enjoy very much. So that's all for today on The French Chef. This is Julia Child. Bon appétit.
The French Chef has been made possible by a grant from the Polaroid Corporation and by a grant from Hills Brothers Coffee Incorporated.
Julia Child is co-author of the book, Mastering the Art of French Cooking.